Hey everyone, Guys Progressive here. I'm sure you've all heard the Pope's recent comments about, quote, atheist extremism in the 12th century. So this is going to be a video about that. If you haven't heard the quote, the Pope made a speech prior to his upcoming visit to England. In the speech, the Pope said, quote, even in our lifetime, we can recall how Britain and her leaders stood against a Nazi tyranny that wished to eradicate God from society and wished to deny humanity to many, especially the Jews, who were thought unfit to live. I also recall the regime's attitude to Christian pastors and religious who spoke the truth in love, opposed the Nazis, and paid for their opposition with their lives. As we reflect on the sobering lessons of the atheist extremism of the 20th century, let us never forget the exclusion of God, religion, and virtue from public leads, ultimately a truncated vision of man and of society, and thus a reductive vision of the person and his destiny. Unquote. This entire statement is nothing but a fallacious, poorly conceived revision of history. Let's begin with the first sentence where the Pope says, quote, even in our lifetime, we can recall how Britain and her leaders stood against a Nazi tyranny that wished to eradicate God from society and wished to deny humanity to many, especially the Jews, who were thought unfit to live. First, the Nazis wished to eradicate the Jews from society, not God. There were very few, if any at all, vocal or prominent atheists during this time period. Many Nazis were Christians and displayed their Christian values on their belt buckles. So for the Pope to equate the Nazis with being godless is fallacious, which is what he's doing here. Second point. I find it highly hypocritical that the Pope would make such a statement, considering the fact that the Catholic Church spread vicious rumors for centuries, demonizing the Jews to the point where they became a second-class citizen, and also became an easy target for someone like Hitler to demonize and ultimately try to eradicate from the earth. Let's go on to the second statement the Pope makes. He says, quote, I also recall the regime's attitude to Christian pastors and religious who spoke of truth and love, opposed the Nazis, and paid for the opposition with their lives. This is nothing more than the Pope trying to position Christians as the persecuted ones, when in reality, nothing could be further from the truth. As I mentioned earlier, there were really very few, if any, vocal or prominent atheists in Germany during this time period. If the Nazi Party represented anything, it was overt nationalism. And since many in Germany were Christians, many Nazis were Christians. The second point I would make in regards to this statement is there is a very distinct tie between the Catholic Church and Nazi Germany. Not only were many Nazis, as I've stated earlier, Christians, the Catholic Church specifically gave money and lent their vocal support to the Nazi Party as well as the Fascist Party in Italy. So the Pope trying to position Christians as being persecuted as well during this time period is fallacious. And finally, The third statement the Pope makes is, quote, as we reflect on the sobering effect lessons of atheist extremism of the 20th century, let us never forget the exclusion of God, religion, and virtue from public leads ultimately to a truncated vision of society and thus a reductive vision of the person and of his destiny. Again, another false statement. The Nazis were never atheists, and it's disingenuous of the Pope to suggest this. Second point, the Pope makes this argument about atheism leading to the moral decay of society under the false premise that the atheism is a worldview. Atheism is not a worldview. Atheism is merely a response to theist claims. That's all it is. There is no tenets. There is no dogma. Atheism is a response to theistic claims, and that's all it is. The third point is, let's say we give the Pope the benefit of the doubt and say that when he was referring to an atheistic worldview or atheistic extremism, he's referring to secularism, because that is often equated with atheism. If we grant him this, it strikes me as very odd that the Pope would make an argument that secularism leads to the moral decay of a society in a speech when the Pope is getting ready to visit a country that A, is secular, and B, a country he was trying to placate just a mere 2 sentences earlier. Finally, I find it to be the textbook definition of hypocrisy to speak of virtue when the Pope is guilty of protecting child molesters from prosecution. Protecting child molesters from prosecution is anything but virtuous. So, in summation, the Pope is an asshole. Fuck the Pope. God's progressive. Peace.